Fans from around the world sent letters to Ozzy Osbourne's family in the days following his passing. One even arrived from Germany, a simple but heartfelt card, a reminder that though he had moved across the world, Birmingham, his birthplace, was always in his heart. At Ozzy Osbourne's funeral, no one expected his dog to steal the moment. Yet what happened next left the entire church frozen in disbelief. The skies over Birmingham that morning were heavy and gray, as if nature itself understood the weight of the day. It was in this city, the birthplace of Black Sabbath, that Ozzy Osbourne, the Prince of Darkness, was to be laid to rest. Fans had gathered on the streets long before the hearse arrived. Some sang his songs, others stood in silence, eyes red from tears, and many simply wanted one final goodbye to the man who had given them not just music, but a language, a voice, and a sense of chaotic comfort. This funeral was more than a farewell to a rock icon. It marked the closing of an era, a fading world that seemed to leave with him. But what made the day truly unforgettable was not just Ozzy's presence, or rather his absence, it was what happened around him. Sharon Osbourne arrived early, supported closely by Kelly and Jack. Her eyes were hidden behind dark glasses, but her trembling hands lingered on the side of the casket, as if afraid that letting go might cause everything to collapse. Kelly looked drained, pushed beyond tears. Jack, more serious than anyone had seen him in years, stood silently, only nodding occasionally at familiar faces. And then there was Rocky. His name was not spoken aloud that morning, but his absence was deeply felt. Rocky, the little Pomeranian, had been more than just a pet to Ozzy. He was an anchor during years of illness and pain. When Rocky died in 2024, something inside Ozzy shifted. He became quieter, more withdrawn, even telling Sharon once that death itself would have felt like a gift. Few people knew that Ozzy kept Rocky's ashes in a wooden urn inside his music room. He had once told Sharon, "If they ever put me in the ground, put him in there too." And Sharon remembered. On that very morning before the prayers, she placed a small velvet pouch containing Rocky's ashes alongside him, just as he had asked. But that was not the moment that shook everyone. Just before the service began, there was a stir near the front row. A dog had appeared, Bugsy, the badly burned rescue pup that Ozzy and Sharon had adopted shortly before Rocky passed. Bugsy had not been meant to attend the funeral. Sharon had arranged for him to stay with Jack's wife, but somehow through confusion or instinct, the little mutt ended up in Birmingham. Jack later admitted they found him sitting quietly in the backseat of a family car, and it felt wrong to turn him away. Bugsy had grown close to Ozzy in his final years. He would sit by his side during treatments, follow him from room to room, and curl at the foot of his bed when nights were hard. Sharon would often say, "He does not just like you, he guards you." Ozzy would laugh, pat his head, and call him the little devil with good timing. Now inside the church, surrounded by flowers and silence, Bugsy began pulling at his leash. The moment the coffin lid was opened briefly for family viewing, Bugsy slipped free from Kelly's grip. He trotted calmly, almost purposefully, down the aisle. The crowd parted for him, not because they were told to, but because it seemed instinctively right. The music stopped. The priest looked on silently. Sharon froze her lips, trembling. Bugsy jumped onto the coffin, rested his small paws on the polished wood, and pressed his nose against it. Then slowly, he laid his head down, right where Ozzy's chest would have been. The room fell silent. Kelly gasped. A musician dropped a guitar pick. Nobody dared move. Bugsy stayed there, eyes half closed, perfectly still for more than a minute. But then something strange happened. He sighed long and low, as if something inside him had released. Then his body began to tremble in a rhythmic way, not from fear, but as if he was sensing something unseen. His ears perked, head tilted, and his breathing shifted. Sharon gripped her tissue tighter, watching closely. A faint breeze drifted through the church, even though the windows were closed and the doors locked. The candles flickered, then stilled. Bugsy suddenly let out a sharp bark that echoed off the stone walls. He turned his head toward the empty aisle, staring at something no one else could see. The atmosphere in the church shifted. Sharon whispered softly, "Come on, love, let's get down." But Bugsy did not move. He simply lowered his head again on the coffin and stayed there. The priest hesitated, then quietly began the service. Kelly spoke first, struggling through memories of her father, his humor, his strange taste in films, his love of crime documentaries, and above all, his devotion to his animals. Her voice cracked when she mentioned Rocky, and her eyes fell on Bugsy still resting on the CEU. The next morning, Sharon woke to silence. The house felt too still without Ozzy's cough, Bugsy's tapping paws, or the kettle whistling. She found Bugsy sitting at the glass door staring into the garden where Ozzy had spent his final weeks wrapped in a blanket listening to the wind. Later that day, Jack sent Sharon a video from one of the photographers at the funeral. It showed Bugsy's moment on the coffin from a closer angle. When Sharon replayed it, she noticed something chilling. At the exact moment Bugsy tilted his head and sighed, the video caught a faint distortion in the air behind him, like heat waves rising from pavement. It was not near any candle or light. Sharon paused, zoomed in, but the image blurred. Later, sitting in Ozzy's untouched music room, Sharon found a list tucked into his old desk. Written in his messy handwriting, it detailed how he wanted things handled when he died. It mentioned a simple goodbye, a specific song, and being laid to rest with something personal, but one line stopped her cold. Ozzy had written it long before Bugsy ever came into their lives, yet somehow it seemed to describe him. That evening, Sharon showed the video and notebook to Kelly and Jack. None of them could explain it. None of them dismissed it. Bugsy simply lay at their feet calm as though he had already understood. The following night, Sharon saw something she could not deny. Bugsy sat in the music room staring at Ozzy's old chair. Slowly, the chair began to rock without a draft, without anyone touching it. Sharon froze in the doorway. The chair stopped only when she placed her hand on it. Bugsy nudged her leg gently as though telling her not to be afraid. In the days that followed, Bugsy barely left Sharon's side. He sat at her feet, followed her room to room, and curled outside her bedroom door each night. One morning, she found him staring at Ozzy's old slippers. She left them untouched. Soon, the family decided to build something lasting, an online archive, where fans could share memories, photos, and stories of Ozzy, not just as the rock legend, but as the man behind the stage. Fans from across the world offered to help build the site for free. And through it all, Bugsy stayed close, as if guarding not just Sharon, but Ozzy's memory. So what really happened in that church? Did Bugsy sense something the rest of us could not? Was it instinct, memory, or something beyond explanation? What do you think Bugsy saw that day? Share your thoughts in the comments. Do not forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories like this.